children of the past had dreams for the future as we do today. They would look ahead with eyes of hope and eyes of fear, not knowing what life would bring. As towers grew larger and life became faster, the speed of change became clear. I came across a book called Seville Oranges, which was compiled of poems written by children in South Wales during the 1960s. I quickly realised that many of the poems discussed these hopes and fears for the future. The children had seen the ever-changing world around them and had reacted with great creativity and poignancy. So, I decided to try and track some of the authors down and see if their poems still resounded with them today. The first poem is called The Dawn, After a Nuclear War, and was written by Mary Barnett, now a Labour councillor in Cwmbran.
I was delighted that you got in touch about this poem, which I'd practically forgotten about. I wrote it when I was in the sixth form at Pontypool Girls' Grammar School about just under 60 years ago. We were taught solely by women. And career women. Many of them had lost husbands, some indeed in the First World War, fiancés and husbands in the Second World War, and these were women that were out really to help educate the next generation of women. And we were encouraged to look at political issues, contemporary issues, to consider university and to broaden our horizons. And many of us did, and we must pay tribute to that. And it was still considered rather a strange career choice in those days, when it was expected that women should marry, have children and perhaps have a little job for some pin money, but otherwise become totally, a focus of the domestic scene. And suddenly we were going off in quite substantial numbers. At the time when I was in the sixth form, we had a great period of change. In many ways it was exciting. We were the first generation to invent the teenager. Up until then, you were a child until you were 21, and you then became an adult, dressed like an adult, and did the kind of jobs that adults do. We became a cult of our own, the teenagers, and tended to have various little gangs. We had mods and rockers in the 60s, for example, and hippies, and the Hells Angels, and you tended to identify with that kind of group with your own particular taste in music, your own particular style of clothes, even your own particular style of talking. And we saw the birth of the cafe culture for young people with jukeboxes, which were tremendous. Meet up with some of the boys from the boys' grammar school, and we would think we were great playing the jukebox and having frothy coffee, as it was called then, and debating these issues. We did have a joint debating society. And we were becoming more global, partly because of the advent of television. You were looking further than your own country and further than Europe, and we were aware of some of the challenges faced by emerging countries, the starvation, the Biafran crisis, a whole host of social and political issues. But the one issue I think that united most young people was the anti-nuclear movement.
Agonized tenseness. Now but 5 seconds to go. And
time, my generation was the first generation to be born and live through a nuclear age, with the atomic bomb obviously being set off in Hiroshima and Nagasaki the year after I was born. During the time when we were studying for sixth form, we did have the Cuban crisis. And for the first time we started to realise that there might be another war. As has been said, of course, by one politician, that if the next world war is a nuclear war and is fought with nuclear weapons, the one after that will be fought with bows and arrows. And our minds were torn between, should we continue studying or should we just enjoy life? Because literally one didn't know from hour to hour whether the Cuban crisis would ignite a world war or not, and if it did, it would be a nuclear war, because that was the threat that was being made. Obviously it was a very real fear, and it was a fear, I think, that just a few years later was reflected in many of the songs of the icons we had then, like Bob Dylan, Donovan in England, and a little bit later in the 60s, John Lennon and others. This feeling that we were the first generation that really felt we could be a moving force in working for peace. You had the American Peace Corps, we had CND, we had the various anti-nuclear movements. Most of us wore CND badges, most of us belonged to, the equivalent of the kind of green movement. And there was a general feeling that we're inhabiting the earth, but it doesn't give us the right to destroy the planet. So we were very sort of tuned in to political issues. Now at last the dawn has come, upon a world that can no longer strive. But at what cost? Mankind is lost, and I alone am left alive. From where I lie, I can see her rays, pushing back the welcome night. Once again, my tortured brain remembers that cursed man-made light. But how can I compare this dawn, so pale, translucent and serene, with that fierce blast, man's first and last, which orphaned itself and wrought this scene? But what will this new light reveal that darkness sheltered all night long? A world that's torn, shown by a dawn that God created for Eden's wrong. And yet the dawn, full force at last, will torture me with what has been. Christ, if you're born, take back your dawn, or else take out the life in me.
The second poem I found is called Pie into Progress and was written by Henn, now a retired librarian.
Well, I wrote it when I was 14 or 15 in the 1960s. My father was a miner, my mother was a housewife, and so we were quite a little nuclear family. We had aunties and uncles and grandparents. So it was quite a closed society. I was grounded, but I did want to look like Dusty Springfield. I spent a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort painting my eyes black and my lips white. I thought I looked like it. White lips, black eyes. It's like a panda There was a refrain in the house, "You're not going out like that, are you?" So, yes, I am. You would see yourself perhaps as not wanting to be like your parents so much. Possibly a little bit of generation friction, perhaps. Well, I suppose in the 60s you've got, exciting things like going to dances in coffee bars, which we're allowed to go to. Well, as regards potential, a girl growing up in the 60s, you could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, you could be working in a shop, you could be a secretary, a typist, going on to be a secretary. I don't know that there was an awful lot else that was even thought about for young women. Not from working class backgrounds at any rate. I was just an ordinary person. I had a Christian upbringing. I wasn't particularly ambitious, I wasn't particularly clever. I knew my limitations from a young age, so I thought, well, get a job, see what happens. I came from a Christian background in as much as I was sent to these things, and then later on it became more real to me. So I attend a place of worship now every Sunday. Big deal. I would like to do more, but I can't. I'm not being led in any way. But yes, I've got a Christian faith. Yes, I think that it gives you. You believe that you have a relationship with God, which sounds very presumptuous, but that's what we believe. We believe that if we ask for strength, He will support us. And I used to like visiting cathedrals a lot. I like the atmosphere of the places. And very often, I would be the only person in these buildings. I imagined that sometime in the future, these places would be empty. They wouldn't be used for worship. They wouldn't be used for museums even. So I wrote that. It had gone on for years. I mean, the sort of religion, Christianity in the valleys was declining and declining, as it is in many parts today. There was much more to do as the years went by. If you look at old chapel timetables, there was something going on every night of the week. For men, women, children, teenagers. Now there's television, there's Netflix. There's absolutely everything. You don't have to leave your home to be entertained. You don't even have to go out to the pictures because it's all at home. And I think because there was more for people to do, perhaps they dropped away. Perhaps a lot of people went for social reasons, which is no bad thing. But I think that because things were more centred on the home, a lot of the activities stopped. I don't know when it started. A social historian might say it started after the First World War. I think people possibly, when they came back, were disillusioned. Perhaps they had seen dreadful things, perhaps. And I suppose that would rock their faith. It's a dreadful situation for all these people. I didn't have wild interest in the Cuban Missile Crisis or, God forgive me, John Kennedy getting assassinated. Everybody's supposed to know where they were. I have no idea where I was. But then you look at it and all you can say is, well, thank God it's not happening to me. And that's selfish, it's like that poem by John Betjeman about the woman praying and saying, and whatever Lord may be, don't let anyone bomb me. Henn to Progress, a hymn in stone, in wood and glass, a song to him who moved the craftsman's hands, a hymn still sung today to 2 or 3, who come to stare but never once to pray. 2 vergers and some tourists do not pay, so pull it down. We are functional, we are modern, we are socially aware. We are good citizens. Pull down that heap of mouldering stone. Pull down the triforium and the Purbeck pillars. Dig up the bones and bury them elsewhere. and take the treasures to some museum to rot. Build us a library, a bowling alley, a public house, a new school, a community centre, something useful. Yes, pull it all down. We have no time for dust or mouldering tombs, for we are functional. But more than that, we are progressive, and progress is our God.
Have we gone too far? Or are we on the road to moral nirvana? Many people look back with nostalgia, regarding life before as something to be revered, and some look at it as rightfully obsolete. These childhood poems express mirrored truths which echo between us. The fear of war and our rejection of faith, all with science pushing us beyond. I wonder, what poems are our children writing today?